Yeah, it's a pretty high elevation. We had a lot of winds. It was like all day pushing and even hiking the bikes. But the landscape again, it was so incredible. We were surrounded by volcanoes. It was absolutely beautiful and so breathtaking to know that like I'm such an autonomous person being able to be in inhabitable land where you could never survive if you were, I don't know, like left here, but then you're here with your bicycle and somehow manage to set up a tent and cook your food and experience it this way. So amazing.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm thrilled to welcome my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Melanie Schautt. Earlier this year, Melanie set off with her good friends Luise and Blanka for a 7-month-long journey through South America. Starting in the windswept landscapes of Patagonia, she'd end up cycling all the way to Colombia. Melanie was no stranger to outdoors pursuits. She's an avid hiker, ski tourer and climber, but bike travel was a relatively new experience for her, and she's the first to admit that first week in Patagonia, well, it was really challenging. A total beginner, seemingly jumping in at the deep end. But she persevered, and along with her close friend Luise, she would cycle across Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, Peru and Ecuador, taking on some incredible off-road routes all along the way. On this journey, Melanie also wanted to connect with the Indigenous communities living in the places she'd be riding through, stay with them, and have them share about their culture. By doing this, she not only embraced the physical challenge of bike travel, but also experienced profound moments of cultural exchange. I'm super excited to hear about Melanie's journey, the lessons she's learned all along the way as she shed her beginner bikepacking skin and took on ever more challenging routes. Forever motivated, she would say, by the dreamy wild camp vistas she'd wake up to each morning outside of her tent. But I also want to learn, what's it actually been like now that she's returned back to her home in Innsbruck? How has she adjusted to the routine of daily life? And also learn how she is now helping to spread the stoke of bike adventures to others as well. Melanie Schautt, a big warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm super pumped to chat with you, Melanie. I know through researching you this past week that we're going to have some exciting stories to share and to learn from you. But Melanie, a question I start my show with, and I ask it of all my guests, is, Melanie Schautt, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I actually do not remember my first bike I rode. But I do remember the bike that I took to school every day. And because in my hometown, it's really nice to cycle everywhere. And so I took my bike to school every day. It was like a tiny red bike. And yeah, that was the thing I did every day.
Oh, wow. Did you bike commute your whole school time or just for the first few years?
No, always. Actually, in our hometown, it's so normal to cycle to school when you're 6. So you just when you're 6, the parents are like, okay, go ahead and see you later.
So you're talking about Germany there, though. You grew up in Germany, right?
I grew up in Germany, yeah. And we have no car culture of dropping kids off at school at my hometown. So whatever weather, you just got to go and head on your bike.
I have to ask, in your part of Germany where you grew up, what was winter cycle commutes to school like?
Very foggy. So I grew up on a big lake, next to a big lake, and in the winters it was only fog for months. So yeah, you could barely see anything at all. But when the fog cleared off, you can see the snow-capped mountains behind the lake, which is really beautiful.
You grew up close to those big mountainous landscapes. Would you say that contributed to your love of the outdoors?
Potentially, yeah, for sure. And my parents always took me to hiking, skiing, holidays, so that was I think it did set some sort of idea in my head.
Because you're in Innsbruck now, surrounded by mountains, so I would call you a mountain lover. Am I right to assume that about you? Like, do you equally love being by the beach, or would you, if you had to choose one, would it always be mountains over the ocean?
It would be mountains, yeah. It would be mountains. Yeah, it was an active choice to move to Innsbruck because I wanted to be closer to the mountains, especially, I don't know if you know this, but being close to the mountain doesn't equal being right in the mountains. Like, if you go on a weekend trip for like one day to go skiing, you might do this for like 3 or 4 times a year, but actually like being right here really enables you to get into, yeah, the sport without this threshold of always making it a big, I don't know, journey to go to the mountains.
I always think it's buzzword bingo on the podcast, listeners. How many times is Bella going to mention the word, I live in the Pyrenees? But in my little village in the Pyrenees, I feel that every day when I wake up because, you know, even if I'm just going for my normal walk, which typically is straight up a hill, that feels like something that I, you know, in another life would wait to take time off from work to drive to a place to go on this amazing place. And so I totally understand that.
Yeah.
I think we're kindred souls moving to a mountainous area.
Totally, yeah.
What sort of sports then were you looking at really participating there when you went to Innsbruck? Because I know that bikepacking's a fairly recent thing for you. So it wasn't riding bikes up mountains, was it? What sort of outdoor things were you into?
So I was mainly into ski touring. Like, I started ski touring here, but I love to go skiing, definitely. I also love bouldering and climbing and hiking in general, just more of that assembly. And it's really funny because I talked to my friends all the time that had bikes in Innsbruck, and because it's a huge thing here, mountain biking, road biking, all sorts of cycling actually. And I was always like, no, I'm not getting into a new sport. This is expensive enough what I'm doing with all the skiing and climbing and whatever. This is it. And I cannot afford another expensive sport. And then, so I kind of like actively chose not to do the cycling thing.
Oh, now you're doing it?
And then all of a sudden I'm sitting on a bike to South America. But
wow. Total rough tangent there, but I have to mention it because I've not been to Innsbruck, but I feel like I've been to Innsbruck because during the pandemic, I had to feed my passion for cycling on an indoor trainer. And like many millions of people, I used the indoor application called Zwift. And so they have a course through Innsbruck, which takes in one of the big climbs that goes from Innsbruck as a loop. And it's all virtual, but you feel like you're doing the thing. But actually, I have a soft spot for it because that's where I met one of my dearest friends, Alison. We both were doing a race who got dropped on a climb. And I don't know, Alison, if you're listening, I think we both need to go to Innsbruck in real life. So hang on, went to South America, never riding before. Now you come back and you're into bikes. I'm thinking you're mountain biking though, right? Not road riding?
I have a gravel hybrid kind of bike with mountain bike tires. But yeah, I should start getting into mountain biking because I think this would be a lot more fun to me than road cycling. So yeah.
To me, I think mountain biking might feed the part of your brain that enjoys the problem-solving element like bouldering would and rock climbing. Because I think with mountain biking, you can't switch off. Everything is alert all the time.
Yeah, and I do have to admit, like, I love the downhill part of cycling. I love, like, the speed and the challenge and the adrenaline and everything.
Oh, wow. I need to come over to Innsbruck, Melanie, meet you in real life, rub your arms really vigorously and see if that can rub off on me. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat when it comes to downhills.
Maybe we should mix up a little bit because I have a problem with not being scared enough. So even with my fully loaded gravel bike, I was like, yeah, downhill. And Luise with her mountain bike was like, no, you shouldn't go down here.
I think if you just take 10% of my fear, that would be adequate enough. I can give 10% to 9 other people and then I'll be fine.
Perfect, okay.
Do you think any of that's got to do with your skiing background or your rock climbing background and maybe putting yourself into areas where perhaps there's a perception of more sort of risky terrain?
I think like your brain really adapts to, because if you never confront yourself with fear or this moment when you're on the rock and you know there is danger, there is actual danger and not just like danger that we make up in our minds all the time. But if you really confront yourself in those outdoor sports with dangerous situations and you learn to deal with this better, I think it's something you can train too. Like if you never really get yourself in those situations, you make up like dangerous situations in your mind or you perceive everyday situations as dangerous even though they're not. So I would say if you really expose yourself more to like actual dangerous situations that you're not going to die, but like if you're on a rock and you know, okay, if I lose my grip now and I'm falling, then that's actually a dangerous situation. So I guess that really, sets the mind maybe also for downhill biking. I don't know.
I feel, though, that your personality type there, where you said that you don't perceive the risks and you don't have the fear perception as strongly as perhaps some others do, I actually think that's a good trait to have when you're taking on an adventure like the one that you did. If you had a lot more fear, I think knowing the areas that you went in, that could have been quite interesting to put that on top of everything else that you had to deal with and problem solve there as well.
For sure, yeah. But also in this sense, I think that in my life, I've done this several times, that I exposed myself to situations that I didn't know what was going to happen. And I think it's more the experience that you make when you're just doing that. If you say, okay, I don't know how this is going to go, I'm just going to do it, and then we'll see what happens. And if you, from those decisions, learn that nothing bad ever happened to you, then I think it's just a lot less scary to do those, like to go on an adventure and to just wing it and just see what's happening.
Something else I learnt about you was your journey in Patagonia, which we're going to be speaking about very shortly. It wasn't your first time in South America, because you actually spent time there at university in Chile, right?
Yeah, I studied in Chile for half a year, 4 years ago. I speak Spanish fluently, and that really helps in South America.
It's a huge opener to the whole continent there in South America, isn't it, learning the Spanish language? Because apart from a few that speak Portuguese, all of them are speaking Spanish.
Yeah, and that actually makes South America such an attractive continent, I think, to travel to, because as soon as you master the Spanish language, it really just it lowers the barrier of communication with the people and everything that you have to deal with, because it's so much easier to get in touch with people. Yeah. And we're probably going to talk about this, but I love to chat with people, and especially to get to know about the ways of living of other people, to explore new forms of how people live and what they think and how they perceive the world. And that's just not possible in places where you just don't understand the people. Yeah. It's really nice to have more connections like that.
It was definitely something that I noticed, which was a big part of what type of experiences you wanted to get out of this trip. It wasn't purely, I guess, testing yourself in a total different sport and a total different mode of travel. It was seeking those connections, genuine connections, I would say, as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I need to find out then, what sparked the idea of, I'm going to go on tours through South America on a bike. I've never done it before, but why not give it a go? How did it all become a thought bubble? How did you actually go from idea into action here?
I think it's quite a funny process. I did have this thought in my mind that I wanted to go on a long adventure for a long time. I have been traveling before through different parts of the world, but never really for a very long time or even an unlimited time. And at some point I felt that I started working in Innsbruck full time, and I felt like, wow, the longer I wait, the harder it's going to get to actually go on a longer adventure. Because, I mean, you know this, you start working, and then the older you get, the more responsibilities you have. There's insurances and everything, and your friends just get more settled in and kind of adapt to the normal path of life. And then just to say, okay, I'm just going to go travel for a year is not that easy anymore. So it was good that in my job, my full-time job, which I didn't really love, by the way, I met Luise.
Hi, Luise.
Hi, Luise. And she had this idea to go bikepacking through South America. And she talked about bikepacking. I was like, yeah, I don't even have a bike.
So much of a beginner. You don't even have the bike. I love this.
I didn't even have a bike. But the more we talked about this, and she told me about a trip she did from Canada to Mexico. And I was like, wow, how could you even cycle through a whole country? I don't even know if I ever rode more than 30 kilometers on a day. So there was a point where it's like, wow, this is actually a really cool thought to just get on a bicycle and cross a continent. That was a construct in my mind that never crossed me before. The more we talked about this, though, I was like, hey, this actually sounds like a really cool idea. But I told her, I don't have a bike. I don't know how to cycle, really. I know how to cycle, but not long-term cycling. Yeah, and then a lot of things happened in my life. My relationship from back then fell apart, and all of a sudden this situation was just so there that I could just also go right now, because the Like I also quit the job and everything. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to buy a bike now. And then at that point we were like, okay, we're going to do this.
Because you are right. You're sort of at that junction in your life where to take this much time out at this age is an opportunity you possibly have. But if you're to keep delaying that, that has consequences potentially later on, whether that be with a career, whether it be with looking to settle down, whether it be looking to start a family or something like that. Those sort of pressures are there for you the longer you sort of leave it, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think this is really hard if you think about like I'm like in my late 20s and I kind of want to be successful or getting on with a career that I've started. But at the same time, I want to use this freedom that I still have because I'm not bound to like a settled environment. I'm not bound to this one job that I have to do or a family yet or something. So it's like, it's really a precious time in your life, I think, those years. So.
Okay, so hang on. Louise was the biker first. She introduced the concept to you. How long was that period of time of being convinced that you wanted to do this? How, like, from when she first mentioned it to you going, I'm going to join you, how long had passed?
I think maybe she introduced this concept to me because I met Louise 1 year before the trip. And then we met at work. And then maybe half a year before the trip, she was like, yeah, she's going to go on this adventure. And then we started brainstorming about this because I was like, I spent time in South America before. I really wanted to go back there and travel more in South America. And then I was like, this is a perfect opportunity. And then I just, at some point I was like, yeah, maybe I'm going to join for a little bit. Like I wasn't like, I'm going to do the whole thing with you. At that point, I was also still with my boyfriend from that time. And I was like, maybe I can just join for like 2 months or so. And then I bought the bike. And a few months before the trip, we went on like a little bikepacking weekend where I kind of tried out if this is something I could do. But then that was also the only time that we actually tried bikepacking before.
Where did you go and what did you do? And did you load the bike up as if you were loaded up for South America, or was it like a flash packing, lightweight sort of bike style tour?
It was an absolute disaster, actually.
Oh, gosh, I love this. I've just opened up the door to a great story. Come on in and tell us all about it.
Yeah, because so at that point, it was a few months before we started the trip. And like I had no idea about what I need to have on my bike. And so I had the bike, but I had no equipment. And I had like started to buy random bags for the bike, but I had no idea what would actually fit on a bike. I had never heard the term frame bag before, so I just really didn't know what would be a good thing to pack. I kind of, for that bikepacking weekend, I rented out things from friends and borrowed things and strapped them on the bike. I realized this is a lot harder than I thought. I thought I'm just going to put 2 bikes on my back and that's it. But then, like on that weekend, I borrowed a saddlebag in the back and that it like always like slammed on my back tire. And it was really difficult because, yeah. And in the end, we took on this trip and Luise, well, it was a pretty tough loop that she planned for us with a lot of hike-a-bike and stuff in between. And in the end, it was scenery-wise, it was amazing. But I also had to change so many things on my bike, I realized, and I had a bit of a knee pain going on, and the gears were still way too hard for me, so I had to change the gear set. And also, we got food poisoning by a water well on the second day.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. So I came home from this trip, and I was like, "This is hard. This is." But I was sure that it was just like the circumstances that we were in on this weekend that were pretty tough. But if I had known, it was actually not the circumstances. It's just bikepacking in general, where things just happen all the time. Yeah, it set the stage.
I say it all the time. When you commit to going bikepacking or cycle touring, whatever style of bike travel you're undertaking, you don't realise it, but just sign yourself up to a crash course in problem solving because things are going to happen and you're going to have to figure out how to work it out, aren't you?
Yeah, and on a daily basis, yeah.
On a daily basis. You mentioned there how you had the knee pain because your gearing wasn't correct. So you changed your gearing then for South America?
Yes, and that's one thing that I'm so glad about that I did. Before the trip, I did like a bike fitting. because several people have recommended this to me. I mean, there were a lot of my friends, they were like, Mel, what are you doing? Like, you're going on a big trip. You've never even cycled before. Are you sure, like, you know a lot about bikepacking? You should at least do like a bike fitting thing. So I did that, and that was really the best thing, even though I had to invest a few $100 more to change up a few things. Like, they changed my saddle position with a different saddle stem. They changed the position of my handlebar, and also got like way better gears so that I could cycle up hills a bit easier.
It's a game changer, putting the right gears on your bike, especially for where you're going in Patagonia. Last year, I took a bikepacking trip across the Pyrenees. So I cycled the Pyrenees mountain range. I haven't yet cycled a continent, but I have cycled a mountain range, and it was like the best thing I've ever done in my life that's bike related. And I remember that was something I did before we left, was put some nice big chunky dinner plate cassettes on the back of our bike. And can I just tell you, there is never a time that I am unthankful for those gears, those extra gears.
Yeah.
There were times where I was spinning to win, and I would still try and find, is there another gear?
Yeah.
You'll never, ever be upset that you have an easier gear to use, but you'd always hate it if you're stuck, right? Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you have like a loaded bike, and even though I tried riding on this loaded bike, but then you don't consider that at some points you have to ride up a hill, and that might just be the hill after you loaded up on food and water supplies. So you even added like another 5 kilos to your bike, or more even sometimes. Yeah.
Do you roughly know what your average weight on the bike was? Luggage and stuff altogether?
I think I've never really weighed it, because I mean, it's always a bit like difficult to put a bike on a scale. But it must be more than 30 kilos. I tried to limit my things on the bike. Like, I had like 2 t-shirts and 1 jacket and things like this. But then, yeah, at some point, there's some things just like add up, and yeah.
Well, water adds up really quickly too. And as you said, if you have to think of extra food and water, that adds weight on very quickly. It was something that you'd mentioned about Patagonia, was that one of the great things there is that you're never too far from a water source.
Absolutely, yeah. I think concerning water supplies, food supplies and everything, bikepacking in Patagonia is actually really easy, because, yeah, I mean, there's rivers everywhere, pure rivers. So compared to the rest of South America that we've crossed, it's been probably the easiest concerning water supplies and everything, where we always just carried 1 liter bottle of water, and you can just filter everywhere.
Would I be right to assume like places like the Altiplano in Bolivia, that wouldn't have been the case then? Was that an area where water was more scarce?
Oh, absolutely. Northern Argentina and Bolivia, especially the Altiplano in Bolivia, is very difficult. And then also in other areas where you just, like, even in like the Amazonas area in Ecuador, you might think, okay, there's a lot of water coming down, but it's just very dirty water and like very muddy water that you don't really want to drink. And yeah, so the clean water that you have in Patagonia is really beautiful, and it's very convenient as a bikepacker.
I guess there's also a reason why there's so much water in Patagonia too, isn't there? Because it rains a lot there as well, doesn't it? You found that out too, didn't you?
Yeah, so much. I don't know if we had 1 day without rain.
Oh my goodness me. It was something that I did see. You had assumed incorrectly that you were there for the end of summer, thinking there would still be some sort of summer, but that was very, very much not the case.
Yeah, I mean, we were there in March, like the beginning of March, and in our minds we were like, oh, this is going to be beautiful. It's the end of summer. It's going to be like a little bit of fall vibes, and yeah, maybe some beautiful colors already. And yeah, no, it's just a lot of rain, and it was a lot colder than we expected too.
Well, how cold did it get there? Like, what sort of temperatures are we talking about? Because then I want to understand, Melanie, and to be fair, listeners, I don't often ask about equipment, but something I do want to know about Patagonia is like your sleep system for cold nights and stuff. What sort of cold temperatures did you have, and how adequate was your sleeping bag and your sleep system in keeping you warm in those temperatures?
Yeah, so I might not have been like a very good cyclist to begin with, so that's definitely something I was not very well prepared with. But I am a very good sleeper, a sleep system, like a sleep, or how do I say that? Like I'm very good at like sleeping outside. So yeah, that was very helpful for this trip. And before the trip, I bought this really good I got this really good sleeping bag from, I don't know, Mountain Equipment. And it's a sleeping bag for comfort zone -9 Celsius, -9, because
And we're talking -9 for women, right? I think that's how they measure the comfort zone. Yeah.
yeah, -9 comfort zone for women. And it makes a huge difference also between men and women because women are colder sleepers than men. And there was not one day that I regretted having a maybe a bit overambitious sleeping bag for this trip, because it's easy to open up a sleeping bag so that you're like, if you're too hot, you can just like cover up only the legs of yourself or something. But if you are during the day a bit scared that it might just be too cold to have a good night of sleep tonight, it makes the trip really hard. And not once have I like feared being cold at night during the trip. So that's really something I'd recommend to people if they think about doing a long trip to areas where it might get a bit cold. Patagonia has been cold-ish, but not terribly cold. We're talking about like maybe between 5 and 10 degrees during the day. And then at night, it never froze during the night, I think. It was always maybe around like 2 degrees, 3 degrees. So.
I'm surprised by that. I had just assumed that it would be like -5 or something.
No, I think that was fine because it was just still raining a lot. So if it's still raining, it's not below zero. But like as soon as we got towards Bolivia, the Altiplano, we had like every night was negative.
Did you take a silk liner with you as well?
That's something I should have brought, but I don't know why I didn't. I wanted to buy one in South America because at some point I was like, okay, this should be something. Luise had one, for example, but I somehow didn't bring one. And yeah, I would definitely recommend bringing one.
Listeners, are you ready to take your cycling adventures to the next level? Well, at the end of June this year, I'm inviting you to join me in the stunning foothills of the Pyrenees for an unforgettable bikepacking tour. Over 6 nights, that's 5 riding days, we're going to be exploring incredible landscapes, riding through small French villages, and experiencing the rich culture and history of this amazing region. But don't worry, you don't need to carry heavy gear or figure it all out on your own. This is a lightweight bikepacking adventure. Just think purely saddlebags and handlebar rolls. It's perfect for those curious to try bikepacking for the first time or wanting to ride with other like-minded adventurers. You're going to have the support of 2 ride leaders. FYI, one of them's going to be me. You'll be in comfortable hotel stays each and every night, enjoying delicious food all along the way. Spaces are limited because I don't want to dilute your experience as being part of a huge group of people. So don't miss your chance to join our immersive cycling experience. To sign up for this tour, head to seektravelride.com and secure your spot. I cannot wait to ride with you in France. I'm stupendously excited for this tour. Come and join me. When the temperatures got much colder there in Bolivia, you had a great sleeping bag, but did you feel a bit cold then as well, or everything was adequate? Like, did you have other techniques? I've interviewed guests before, Melanie, for example, who their technique is, some of them have taken a hot water bottle, some of them, heat up water, wrap it in their bottles, wrap it in clothing and put it in their sleeping bag to help keep warm. Did you do anything like that?
Yeah, so I have different techniques. I can tell you pretty happily that I'm never had a night where I woke up in the night and I was like, oh, I'm freezing.
You really do have the sleep skill, don't you? I don't know. We need to think of a term for you. Sleep genie? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but like even Luise said that several times, that she's very jealous that I'm never cold at night, because even she has a really good sleeping bag too, but then she woke up cold several times. I think there are several things that I do that helps me not be cold at night in those temperatures. So I think first of all, it's important that when you get to your camp spot at night, that you don't get to this point where you just like sit outside of your tent and you cook, and then because if you, after a long cycling day, if your body just like relaxes down and then it's super cold already, and then you're outside of your tent and outside of your sleeping bag, and you just start to get really cold, because then to get warm again, I think this is like a gap that's the danger gap, I would say. So I always try, like when I'm cooking and I'm realizing, okay, I'm starting to get a bit cold, I'm starting to move around a bit, or already get my sleeping bag out to kind of put over me so that I'm not like getting into this like cold gap already. And then just try to get into the sleeping bag as soon as you can. And yeah, if it's really cold, I'd also just put a hot water bottle on my feet.
Great technique.
And this is just great because like I think the one thing that sometimes was cold was my feet. And if you just get a hot water bottle down there, perfect. And then apart from that, I always go with a 2-layer technique. I think you should never put on more than 2 layers in your sleeping bag. If you put on like 4 pairs of socks and like all the jackets that you have, I feel like it's like too tight around your body. That I'm not like a biomechanic or something. I don't know how this like, or a medical professional. I don't really know how this works, but I feel like if you don't give your body enough space to, I don't know, let the blood run through your body. I don't know if that's true.
I think I know what you're talking about there. Like, I've often wondered, I've worn 2 pairs of socks before. I don't think I could get more than 2 on. I have incredibly big feet though. I unfortunately suffer from Raynaud's phenomena. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but it is horrendous. And I actually also get it in my feet as well. And one of the worst things for it is actually if things are on, like if I've got socks on that are too tight. So maybe there's a method to your theory there, what you're talking about. Too many layers can be counterproductive.
Yeah, I think so too. There is this theory that you should sleep naked in your sleeping bag and you'll be warmer, but honestly, it's not for me. I think everyone has to find their own technique, but for me, it's really, if it's really cold, I need to get on like 2 layers on my upper body, 2 layers on my legs, and then 2 socks, and then I'll be fine. Yeah, definitely cover the hat because the warmth really just like goes away from your head too, right? Like,
yeah, wear a beanie.
Yeah, super important to cover up most of your head actually, like with the buff on your face and then a nice hat on your head, and then get the sleeping bag as cozy as you can, and then I think you'll be fine.
Did you have experience of this before you actually went to South America? Like, you know how you love ski touring and hiking, was, you know, winter camping stuff that you had done before?
Winter camping itself, no. That's actually a big thing that I'm planning for this winter.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, I want to get into like ski touring, traversing, winter camping outside. I think this would be like, this is a big thing I want to do this winter. Before the trip, I've done a lot of camping. I did a lot of hiking trips to the Rockies in Canada. And yeah, so I would say even if you're camping in the summer months, if you're camping on the mountains, it's always going to be really cold. I would say I did have some experiences in that sense, but not as cold as South America.
Yeah, I've seen the landscapes, and I've seen the landscapes in your photos. I've seen the photos of your water bottles frozen. It doesn't happen in warm temps at all. Let's rewind a bit though. I want to go back to the idea that you're fairly green, you're fairly much a beginner still. You had that one trip in Germany where I guess you were possibly thankful that a few things went wrong because you addressed those before South America. But that first week in Patagonia, that was really a trial by fire, wasn't it? You were beyond the deep end from a bikepacking point of view, weren't you?
Like I would say even the first 2 weeks were probably the most horrible thing on the whole trip. In all aspects, we got there, we started cycling. In all aspects, just a huge challenge. I think the only thing that really helped was that I was so psyched and motivated to start a big trip that even though there were so many setbacks every day, I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter. We're on this trip. It's amazing. But looking back at these challenges that I had in those first 2 weeks, it was just insane. Like, I don't know if I even posted all of those things, but we got there, we started cycling, and from day one, we had massive headwinds, which I've never experienced before, like winds that were so strong that they really like pushed us off the road. Like they literally like blew us off and like made you flip with your bike.
It's crazy when that happens. Like it's so scary as well. It's like you have no control.
Yeah, sometimes we just sat in like the ditch next to the road for 2 hours because the winds were just too strong.
At this point, I should mention you were cycling north, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
I would be right to assume cycling north, you're more than likely going to have more horrendous headwinds than if you were cycling south, right? Or is it more crosswinds that you're getting?
No, I think it's only headwinds. Also, like that's also something I learned because I've never planned a bikepacking trip before. So I didn't know how important it would be to consider the important wind directions. Like if I were to do this trip again, I would never ever choose a path that will cross 1,000 kilometers through only headwinds. This is just it's yeah, character building. Yeah, so in the beginning, the first week, it was like always headwinds. We also had a lot of rain, only gravel roads, a lot of altitude meters. We cycled for a few days, and then we had a rest day in Torres del Paine Park. And we talked about this before, that sometimes you just have to get really lucky with the weather, and then you have to like seize the day. And on our rest day, the weather completely cleared up, and there were no clouds on the sky. And we were like, okay, we have to do the hike to Torres del Paine. And we hiked up there, and it's like, I don't know, 1,000 altitude meters, 22 kilometers. And I came back down. Yeah, and I realized, oh gosh, like I tried to like be just like do what the other girls were doing and like cycle and just I was so motivated, but I realized my body is not prepared for all this yet, because I came from a winter season of a bit of ski touring, but mostly like preparing for this trip and like sorting out my life at home. And then I started being in this crazy new, I don't know, form of movement every day. Waking up after the first few days and after this big hike too, I don't remember ever having those many sore muscles in my body. Like I had sore forearms from holding my handlebar. I had sore shoulder blades in the back being in this position, and I had sore legs and sore calves and everything.
The wind would have contributed to that immensely, because you have to brace against it so hard.
Yeah.
Especially if it's physically blowing you off the road. I can totally understand you had sore upper body, because I'm doing that now, just thinking about the days where I've had it. The worst wind I've ever experienced, Melanie, was in the south of France. I was heading to Avignon, and the Mistral, the famous Mistral wind, was blowing, and it was gusting between 80 and 90 kilometres an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That was just horrendous. I remember at one stage coming to a total stop and just standing still, and then nearly getting blown over. I wasn't even riding my bike.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, but I've heard Patagonia has got to be like one of the windiest places in the world.
Maybe. I think so too, yeah.
Did you, Luise and Blanka, ever consider just for like half a kilometre turning round and having a tailwind for a little bit just to hear each other?
Yeah, actually, like in the beginning, we just sat in the ditch together, or also we kind of had to figure out how to cycle together, because that was also one of the things that a huge challenge in the beginning, because we were all like differently, yeah, at different levels, definitely. Both of them it's their sport, like bikepacking is their thing, so they do this all the time. And I started the trip having never done this before, so we were at absolutely different levels. And that's also the thing that we really had to figure out, like how do we deal with different speed levels and communication wise, like how do we communicate, hey, I need a break, where are you going to wait? And there's no signal in that area, so you can't really communicate on the phone. So
what did you come up with? Like how did you deal with that sort of problem?
So in the beginning, we were just like, okay, they're going to go ahead, or someone is going to go ahead, and then in 10 kilometers, we're going to wait, and then we'll meet back up.
I guess that's the only way you can do it, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I have to ask, because you set off as a team of 3, I know that it was you and Luise that continued the whole way, and Blanka changed course. Was that always the plan?
No, it was actually, the plan from the whole trip was just, I don't know, none of us really knew how this is going to work in the end. So we were like, okay, we're just going to try this. We're going to arrive in southern Patagonia, and we're going to cycle north, and then whatever happens, happens. And it so happened that, just to finish off this first week in Patagonia, that after this big hike that we did, I was super exhausted, and I felt that there was a flu coming, and I started feeling really feverish. And then Luise and Blanka continued towards on the road, and I kind of thought, okay, I'm just going to hitchhike out of the park. And in the end, it didn't really work out that well, and we met back up in another town just a bit further north a few days later, all the 3 of us. But we already realized that this is like bikepacking as a trio is not as easy communication-wise as it probably would be if it's just like 2 people. Because we also had like a lot of different thoughts on where to spend how much time. And I don't know if you know the place El Chalten.
I've heard of it. I've not been to South America, only through my guest stories, and boy do I want to go.
Yeah.
Maybe not with the headwind though.
Yeah.
I'll go south.
Yeah, please go south. Don't do the same mistakes. Yeah, but in general, we were in this town Echaten. That was after the first 2 weeks of the trip, and it's been really hard. And Blanka is also a passionate climber. And when she got there, just to sum the story up really quickly, she met a few people that she wanted to go climbing with. And she said, "Hey, why don't you guys go ahead?" And she stays in this scene a bit and goes climbing. In the end, she actually met a guy, and who's now her boyfriend.
Oh wow! What a serendipitous moment.
Yeah, and they actually she pretty much ditched the bike and just went climbing with him afterwards for a year. So they're still climbing.
Wow, Blanka, what a story.
Yeah.
And so then it became you and Luise.
And then it became me and Luise.
Is this still then within the first week or a few weeks in?
It was 2 weeks in, I think, or 1.5
weeks
weeks
in.
Yeah.
So hang on, your first week, I'm thinking you've dealt with horrendous headwinds. Your body's trying to adapt to the way that you can move with a loaded bike, riding with the fully loaded bike as well through Patagonia. You mentioned it rained pretty much nearly every day, so it wasn't just windy, but it was wet weather. Your body was broken. You had like a flu or a cold. My fingers are in the air and I've got 5 things going here already. That wasn't the end of it really though either, was it? Because you had so much happen in those first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and once we got to HI10 and Blanka said that she wants to do her own thing, Luise and I actually got food poisoning, and we were out.
Oh my gosh!
for 5 days because it was absolutely terrible. It was the worst food poisoning I've ever had. Yeah, so we were out for a few days. And
what do you think the culprit was? It was food or water?
Eggs. Yeah.
Oh no!
So much bad luck that we had in those first weeks, and at that point, like we were a bit startled. Actually, we were sitting there. We were like, "Oh, this is really tough."
Because you'd have no energy, and it's one of those things I've learnt through interviewing guests is our bodies are capable of doing some incredible things and doing a lot more than we think we can do. But when something like food poisoning hits, your energy levels are totally depleted. It's not sleep deprivation. It's not facing headwinds. It's not cold weather. Like when you have zero energy, and sometimes you still have to do. Oh, I have huge amount of respect for people who can continue on.
Yeah.
So all of this happens to you as a beginner, Melanie. Did you actually have doubts of wanting to continue? Was there ever a point where you were like, Melanie out, I'm going now?
There was, but that came a little bit later because at that point, I kind of want to say it was really tough. There were a lot of things going in a way that I didn't expect them to go. We actually met a couple from New Zealand who were also bikepacking, and they continued for a little bit with us too. And there was this really exciting thing from El Chaten. You can cross over to Chile in Patagonia over the lake of O'Higgins. And it's a really fun crossing because you have to cross 2 lakes on a boat and you never know if the ferries are actually going to come. So it's a really, really cool thing. And that kind of like got my motivation up too, even though we were still a bit down with food poisoning. So we continued on that road. But then there was the Carretera Austral that we followed on north for the next, I think it's almost about 1,000 kilometers. And that was to me like the big challenge, like my big challenge of motivation in bikepacking, because the beginning motivation, like this big hype and excitement that you're doing this new thing, it didn't fade out, but it got a bit less. And then all of a sudden you're like completely in this new life and you're, okay, every day we're basically cycling, and it's on that road especially. It's a lot of gravel roads. It's a lot of hills. It's only rain almost every day, a lot of wind. Almost towards the end of this road, I was like, okay, this is, to me, probably not the most fun thing to do. And I remember writing in my journal, I'm quitting. This is really too hard, or like not as much fun as I expected this to be. And I don't think I want to continue after this Patagonia stretch. And I was ready to like just put the bike aside.
What made you not do that? What made you continue?
It's a very good question. So we got to the end of the Carretera Austral, and I think my illusion of bikepacking, I mean, we kind of talked about this before. It was really that I thought, oh, wow, we're going to we're going to be cycling in the sun, and we're going to put up the tent at night, and I don't know, I might be doing some yoga, or we're meeting friends every day and other people that are cycling, and it's a huge community. And like in the end, that was absolutely the opposite in Patagonia, because to cross 1,000 kilometers on a bike, you also have to do a lot of cycling on a daily basis. And
especially with a headwind.
Yeah, especially with the headwind, you're not advancing as much as you want to be. And the days were very long, and it was a lot of wet times in the rain, and it was very cold. So in my view, it was not that much fun anymore. But I really had to work on my mindset, I realized at some point, because I was kind of always seeing this big objective that we thought about doing, that we wanted to cross this whole continent. In my mind, it was like, oh, if this is so hard now, how can I cross this whole continent? I don't even know how I'm going to get to the end of Patagonia, and it's really hard, and I'm not having a good time. How am I even get to Colombia? I don't even know. And then I realized at the end of this road, like, I can't be thinking in this bigger picture. This is too big of a construct. We started taking it more day by day, and that is, I think, what makes a huge difference. Then I thought, okay, maybe I'm just gonna focus on getting to this next town. And then also the weather changed a bit once we left this Carretera Austral part of Chile. And once I just always started taking it really day by day and thinking, hey, this is a nice area here, I want to get to this lake. Then I would get to this lake and I was like, okay, this wasn't too hard. Yeah, and in that sense, it just made things a lot more feasible, I'd say.
Mini milestones and mini goals along the way, as opposed to this big thing which feels like the equivalent of having to eat a whole elephant all at once.
Yeah.
Can I ask, something that I came across over and over again in your Instagram posts, and we've spoken so openly about it even just in the time we've been talking, is this idea that you started out as a total fresh beginner and you had to, learn to run before you could walk in a way. Totally at the deep end. Did you ever get to a point during your journey in South America where you felt that you were no longer a beginner anymore?
Yes, I would say that, but it did take a lot longer than I thought. In the beginning, I thought, how hard can this be? I'm riding a bike and that's it. But I think there's a lot more to bikepacking than you might think from the outside. There are so many aspects, even just getting towards the mechanical things of your bike. In the beginning months, I would say nothing ever happened to me mechanical-wise. And also planning-wise, it was really easy because the Carretera Austral is just like one road.
There's no decisions to make.
Yeah, so I think it was just, in the beginning, I was just kind of going along. So I just still felt like a complete beginner after probably like 2 or 3 months. Because in Argentina, Luise and I split up for some time too, where I went on my solo bikepacking experiences. And I think that's when I really started to get a way better understanding of this whole bikepacking thing. And then after that, I also identified myself more as a bikepacker, because in the beginning I was just like, I'm kind of tagging along this thing. And on a trip by myself, I realized, okay, this is actually really fun. I'm getting in touch with local people and they're amazed at what I'm doing alone on a bike. And I was starting to get really, feel really proud that I'm doing this. And also, when I started solving my first mechanical issues by myself, I realized, okay, I think I'm starting to get on top of things here. And I'm doing my own route planning. I'm doing my own mechanical problem solving. I'm meeting people and I'm meeting other bikepackers, and I can kind of getting into this bikepacking jargon. And and then I think that was a big turning point for me.
Yeah, and did you find that there was, as soon as you identified more as not so much an imposter, not so much a beginner, but as a bikepacker, did you find then that also coincided a bit more with enjoying it as well?
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Because, and also I think I had to learn from other bikepackers I met on the road that there is not this one type of bikepacking that you can do. There's so many different versions of bikepacking. There are different speeds that you can do this. There's different concepts where there are some people that say, okay, I might just do this as a mode of transport, but we want to get to places and see those places. Whereas other people really see this as like a sportive challenge where they're like, I want to get across this whole continent in 4 months and that's it. So I think one just really has to find their own rhythm and their own focus on what they want to do with this. And I think it took me a long time to get there.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right. I've had the absolute privilege of interviewing guests who fall on each end of those spectrums. Guests who want to cover the biggest distance in the fastest time, or just want to take a journey so that they can say they have crossed a continent or gone around the world. And I've had other guests who their motivations aren't fueled by distances or number of countries, but rather the interactions and the experiences that they're going to get along the way. And they don't care to travel 100 kilometres. If they only travelled 30, 40 or 50, they were very happy each day. And neither is right or wrong. Everyone is different. It fills me with joy just hearing how perhaps it was that time alone which really pushed you more, but then saw you thrive as a result of it as well.
Yeah, and gave me more confidence about like that my own pace and my own way of traveling is not wrong, because I always, like in the beginning, with Blanka and Luise, they are both like extremely good cyclists. Like Luise used to be a professional cyclist, so she's a very fit cyclist. And I kind of, because I hadn't done any bikepacking before, so I was kind of orientating myself on her, and not saying that that's a bad thing, but I was always kind of feeling this pressure that, oh, I need to be as fast as, and it took me a while to just get into this whole different mindset that actually I do like to stop a lot when I'm bikepacking, for example. I do like to take a lot of breaks and look at things. And if I have a trail of thought, because I think that's the beautiful thing about bikepacking, that if you are on a bike for the whole day, you have so much time to think, and you actually get bored so many times. And this is, to me, this is, in the beginning, it was so strange, because I think in my everyday life, I try to eliminate boredom as much as I can, because I want to use my time in the most efficient way. I think maybe that's a German thing or just a modern society thing. So once I was like on this bike, especially by myself, you realize that you don't have a lot to do during the day. And in the beginning, this was so strange to me, and I didn't really know what to do with all this time in my head and all this like emptiness. But then at some point, it just gave me so much creativity and space to think about so many things that I never thought about in such a long time. And I realized, like, my head, for example, started like rhyming things. I was writing poems in my head, and I just like to sit down and just write those down sometimes. And it was really a fantastic experience.
Poems is one thing. You also kept a journal for yourself as well.
Yeah.
Is that something you've always done, like for other types of outdoor adventures, or is this purely a new thing for this trip?
I think I've never journaled on an adventure. So, well, I always kind of try to write down interactions or interesting people I see or meet, because you tend to forget so much, right? I did that a lot in South America. It's really interesting to go through that again when you're back home, because sometimes when you're in this phase of freedom, I feel like you're almost like opening up a new facet of your personality if you're just not in this like construct on this main path of society, but you're doing something completely different. You're meeting other people and you're exploring just things like just on a daily basis of what you want to do, the simple life. And yeah, just to keep that written down somewhere. And now that I'm back in this rather fast-paced life at home, it's really nice to look at that again and be like, hey, wow, okay, life is actually, it's not everything that's serious. It doesn't have to be this serious all the time.
Overwhelmingly, a lot of people say the best thing about their journeys have been the interactions with all the strangers along the way. I'm not saying that has to be the case for you, Melanie, but that's certainly been a big, big theme for a lot of my guests. And it's something I've often thought about is then when we come back to our routine lives in the world that is very familiar, those stranger interactions are very different, if non-existent sometimes too. Is that something that really struck you when you got back home to Innsbruck?
Oh, absolutely. It's such a different life here. And one thing that I've had to think about right now when you said that is, in South America especially, people are very talkative and very, it's easy to get in touch with people and to get in contact with people.
Very open.
very open people, especially if you're traveling on a bike. It's like very interesting to people, and people tend to just talk to you right away. And here it's just, I don't know, like you can count it on one hand how many times a stranger has come up to me and just talked to me since I'm back. So it's a very, very different mindset here in Europe. I mean, you've probably also noticed.
Oh, I have. I mean, in France, my biggest barrier sometimes is just my own language skills. But equally, you're right. People aren't just walking up to you and saying, hey, where are you from? What are you doing here? All those normal questions people ask you that start the conversation, that spark the curiosity. You're not having them in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, not really.
It's a bit sad to think that, isn't it? That we live our daily lives ignorant of the possibility of having those interactions, regardless of just being in daily life, isn't it? Like,
Totally.
it almost feels like sometimes the reasons people go here is to discover cultures, to speak to strangers. We don't do that in our normal routine at all.
Yeah, and that's really, really sad. And yeah, I talked about this in one post that I did. That one time I have like a little rooftop camping car here. And in the morning I sat because like wild camping is a bit difficult in Germany and Austria sometimes, and people are not very open to that. And one morning I sat like in front of my car in like a mountainous area, and I had a really nice morning, but then a car pulled up and I was already bracing myself for a negative comment on that I'm not supposed to camp here. And the interaction had actually been really nice, because the guy in the car just asked me if I wanted some bread from the bakery that he's going to go to. And yeah, it is so amazing. And that really like woke me up again, that even though I have the conception that people here don't like to interact, maybe also I have to be the first person to do more interactions too. Like I am a very talkative person, but I already think like, oh, you just don't do that here. You just don't talk to people on the street. But then also I could just do that, right? And there might be a really nice conversation that leads out of that.
My theory on it is that we've sort of become more individualistic in our society, and there isn't as much community as it exists in other places. And I'm not saying we don't have communities within our own friendship groups, and there are pockets of communities, but I feel that our culture overall in many Western countries of community is sort of being diluted.
Yeah, it's a very anonymous area, I think, that we're developing into. And yeah, I really, really hope that it's maybe going to take another turn at some point where people just start being a bit more open again. Because that's, for example, what I really, really enjoyed in South America, that people aren't just living in their own bubble, in their anonymous, individualistic world. It's just so much about sharing. And like, if you just bring someone along, it's just, you get invited all the time. It's so normal there. Nobody's really taken, what's the word, taken aback. They're like, oh, hi, how are you, who is this? And so like it's just not a problem. And here I feel like if you just bring someone along, even though you didn't ask, people are like, who's this person?
We touched on it briefly. A big part of your journey, Melanie, was being able to spend time with people and within Indigenous communities, and learning through genuine interactions with them, and having them teach you about their culture through that space and that time afforded to you, because you are spending a longer amount of time with them than just, whizzing past and briefly making eye contact and saying hello. Are you planning your next bike adventure? Are you wondering how on earth you're going to carry all your gear no matter what type of bike you're riding? Well, whether you're riding a road bike, a gravel bike, a full suspension mountain bike, a steel bike, a carbon bike, an aluminium bike, Old Man Mountain have you covered with their ultra-durable racks and mounts. They're designed to work with any bike. These racks make attaching your luggage hassle-free, so you can focus on the adventure ahead and not be worried that your equipment's going to let you down. Whether it's a weekend trip or a round-the-world tour, their products are the perfect solution for bike travellers like you. Here's the best part. By choosing Old Man Mountain, you're not only equipping yourself with reliable gear, but you're also helping support me in this independent podcast out. Head over to oldmanmountain.com/Seek Travel Ride to learn more. Your new adventure is just about to begin. Now let's get back to the episode. well, you had these interactions in a few places, but there was one community you spent a lot of time in Ecuador. I wrote the name down. I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but I'm going to say it anyway, and then I'll be surprised at how my Aussie pronunciation, but it was now I'm scuppered because I can't read my own handwriting, listeners. Was it the Kenya or Kenya?
Is the Cañari culture? Yeah.
Cañari. Oh, yes, I can read it now. How long did you spend with them there?
We spent about 4 days with them, and it was really beautiful because, like, I personally had the feeling at some point when I was traveling by bike, because you are covering quite a distance every day and you want to like get somewhere, but this automatically means that you cannot just take off like a week all the time to like stop at places, because you kind of have to decide, okay, I probably don't have all the time in the world because I also have some sort of a budget for this trip and so on. So you kind of have to decide, where do I use what time, and also if you're cycling past things, you do get in touch with people, but also like sometimes you're also just cycling a lot. And yeah, in that area in Ecuador, we were really lucky because we got in touch with the Cañari culture. They are a huge community in Cañar. This is like one state of Ecuador. And yeah, they are an indigenous community, and that family in specific are very, very happy to host people and show them their culture and take them along their everyday life. And that was just really beautiful because it's such a different cultural experience than you would have with like people in bigger towns in South America. And they really showed us so many things about their culture. And what really struck me the most was the younger people that still live there. Some of them also move away, but some of them really embrace this cultural heritage that they have. And they kind of live this hybrid life between, of course they have phones and everything, so it's not like they live like in little like huts on the mountain. They live in normal houses and everything, but they just have this huge cultural part. And also the younger generations, they kind of live this thing where they also go to university, but they also come home and have all these traditions and traditional clothing they wear, and they still learn how to do like all these handcrafting things and these traditional dances. And yeah, we got invited to try all these things, and that was really amazing.
Had you heard about this culture before? Like, was this something you were aware of and it was an area you specifically wanted to get to? Or was this also sort of on the way?
It was on the way, but I got in contact with them because I was, do you know the company called Social B&B?
No.
It's a startup from Germany, and they started doing experiences with like almost like an Airbnb kind of thing, but they partner with local communities so that the stay that you will pay for is entirely sustainable, and the money that you spend on it will only go to this community.
Oh my God, how awesome is this?
Yeah, this is amazing.
How have I not heard of it before?
Yeah, they have a lot of accommodations also in Europe, in South America. And I had gotten in touch with them because they had a whole bunch of new projects coming in Ecuador. And I said, hey, I'm going through Ecuador with my bicycle. If you want me to pass some of them, I would love to meet more communities, because I think this is also a big threshold of getting in touch with the locals, especially like indigenous communities. Yeah, it's easy to just, I don't know, be on warm showers or couch surfing and like get in touch with people like this. But to really get like diving into an indigenous experience is not as easy sometimes, I think. And through them, it really opens doors. And yeah, so I got in touch with a lot of communities like this.
So what is it called? Social B&B?
Social B&B, yeah.
Oh, listeners, I'm going to find it. I'm going to put a link in the show notes because I think there'll be a few people interested in this.
Yeah, I can really recommend checking out their website. They have amazing accommodations. I've been at probably 5 or 6 of them in South America in total, and it's always been a great experience because they always try to find very interesting projects, like ranging from school projects or like indigenous communities or agricultural projects. And yeah, also like price wise, like ranging really between super cheap, but also like very luxury things in the Amazon or something. So yeah, really cool things.
What a great element to incorporate into your journey. That's just fantastic. And you did this in a few places, obviously.
Yeah, and two places in Peru, in two places in Ecuador, and also in Colombia. I found a few different ones, and it was great.
Melanie, I know I'm skipping around with your South America journey. We're not going linear here. Patagonia certainly was a hard start, but in terms of landscapes that were harsh, we mentioned the Altiplano in Bolivia. I'd love you to actually take me there because it's something that I have seen in many of my guests' images. I've watched it and glimpsed it a bit in YouTube clips, but funnily enough, if I talk to South America with people, the amount of times I might mention the Peru Great Divide or Patagonia, Route 40 or the Carretera Austral, but the Altiplano in Bolivia isn't something that comes up often, and I'd love you to tell me all about it.
Oh, I'd love to take you there. It was by far, landscape-wise, my favorite place in South America. Also because this experience, especially cycling through this area, is so intense, just absolutely incomparable with any other experience I had. We had to do a lot of planning to get through this area, and we looped around a bit there too. But in general, it's landscape-wise, just where do I even start? Okay, so we entered the Altiplano in the south of Bolivia, crossing over from northern Argentina through to Chile and into this area. And the landscapes are just out of the world. There's huge volcanoes. They're all like 5 or 6 thousand meters high, everywhere bordering on the sides. They're all snow capped in the top. The colors are of like a red, brown, white, like all different colors. And it's absolutely stunning, even though you have to keep in mind that you're constantly above 4,000 meters of altitude. So it's very cold all the time, probably temperature wise, always around 0 degrees, more or less. And breathing, even though we've been pretty well acclimatized, is very hard all the time. And so if you start cycling through the Altiplano, there's no real roads that go through there. And so there will be no car traffic at all. The only thing that really goes through this Altiplano is Jeep tours that you can book, but they also stick to one certain route. So yeah, as soon as you start branching off this main Jeep track, it's just you and yourself, and it's this huge vastness of landscapes, and there's little salt lakes in every corner. So you go around a little hill, and then you'll see this little blue or green or orange or red lake. I don't know, they all have so crazy colors just waiting around the corner, and flamingos walking on those little lakes, or yeah, alpacas and llamas just anywhere, vicuñas, little animals, and it's absolutely breathtaking.
And I've also seen these weird plants. I don't know, they're not a tree. I don't know what they are. They're a cactus. I've no idea, but they're like really, really tall and thin and weird. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. There is definitely big cacti sometimes, but in that region specifically, I would even say there's very little vegetation.
Oh, it looks so sparse. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've never been at that point of the trip where you just cycle along and you feel so small and so fragile and so in awe of this nature that, like, I had to start crying all the time. And I usually don't cry because of landscapes, but it's just this whole thing that comes together where you're just kind of really proud of yourself for doing this thing, and like being able to cycle through this land, and at the same time this beautiful landscape that surrounds you is just absolutely hitting you. And it just really made me like bust out in tears sometimes because I was just so touched by.
I could imagine doing that myself. You know what you were just saying there, like nature's so grand that makes you feel like the size of an ant.
Yeah.
Overwhelming and just, yeah, and you're out there experiencing it. And there's a vulnerability with it too, because as you say, you're off the tourist trail, you're in this big wide expanse. It's just you and nature.
Yeah.
What a place to be. How long did you spend in the Altiplano? How long does it take to actually traverse when you're bikepacking?
So it really depends on the route you're picking, but if you would go straight through this region, which is like the Lagunas route that many people call it, it would take you like 5 days. Luise wanted to tackle one of her big goals for this trip, though, which is going on a volcano, which is called the Uturuncu, in this region. It's one of the highest roads that you can take, so you can cycle up to 5,800 meters.
Whoa, that's huge.
Yeah.
Is Everest Base Camp even that high? I don't know that it is.
I feel like the Everest Base Camp is at 5,000 or something. Yeah, something in that region.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a super, super big challenge that some bikepackers like to tackle in this region. And Luise, that was one of her big plans for South America. So we looped around and made our tour through the Altiplano 10 days instead of like 5. And we also underprepared for that a bit because we thought we were going to make it in like 7 to 8 days. But we had a lot of, unfortunate circumstances, like with border stations where we were stuck for a day because they just didn't open at the time that we thought they would open. So we were stuck and had to sleep at a border station because otherwise we would have been illegal in the country. And so that took time off of our food supplies too, and that was a bit difficult in the end.
I'm a food lover, and so we have to talk about food at some point here, but I feel like I'd be more worried with rationing water because you mentioned that water's not readily available there. You mentioned there were lakes, but they're salt lakes.
Yeah, you can't filter any water anywhere, and so you really depend on buying water at tiny shops. But there's only like 2 little. It's not even a village. It's like an assembly of houses, I would say, and that kind of prepare for the village, the jeep tours that come through there, because they have to sleep somewhere on the tour. So there's like one hotel and one hostel arrangement, and there you can also spend the night and fill up your water.
Yeah, it's almost similar to guests who've crossed like the outback in Australia and across the Nullarbor. There's nothing except every few hundred kilometres there's like a roadhouse, there's like a fuel service station, somewhere for truck drivers to stop. It's a similar, but in a Bolivian altiplano way.
Yeah, totally. And then you really have to know these spots before you do the tour so that you know where would be the point if you're miscalculating time or something, if you're stuck somewhere. To get more water at some point, because that's literally in the end what could be a bit dangerous too if you miscalculate.
So hang on, did you get to the top of the volcano?
So we started together, and I realized that for me it's still a bit like, because we were still in the beginning of this Altiplano tour, and I realized, okay, this is very tough, and for me probably for a next adventure to tackle something like this. And Luise was really motivated though, and she made it to the top. Yeah.
Go Luisa. And, just the way that you hint next adventure, you started this trip as a beginner, but, you're not a novice now. And I can just tell you're energized. Speaking about bikepacking, I can see many more trips in your future.
There will be, absolutely, yeah.
Another challenging route you took on was in Ecuador, and that was Cotopaxi. And actually, you met up with Giacomo Turco, who I've had the great privilege of interviewing here on the show before as well. Listeners, if you haven't heard Giacomo's episode yet, I'll link it in the show notes. Definitely check him out. He's someone that likes taking on extreme routes. He's not put off by hiker bikes. Was the Cotopaxi trail that you 3 took on together living up to those expectations?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It was actually really funny because we knew that our trip was going to come to an end. And to finish this trip off, it was kind of in that time range. And I knew that Giacomo was going to be in the area. And it was also my birthday weekend. So I thought, okay, now that I have spent 6 months on a bike and I realized getting through the Altiplano, making it through, I knew that I wasn't that bad of a bikepacker in the end. Like if I get my mind to it, I can definitely get through a lot of challenges and really learned a lot about my personal mindset. And in the end, you're always going to just get to the end of the day and you're always going to somehow get to your destination, no matter how. Then for the last few days of the trip, I thought, okay, maybe I want to really test out the limits now. And I chose this route I think it's even on bikepacking.com. And the Cotopaxi Loop, it's 3 days around the volcano. And
I'd love to know what their rating of that is because I remember reading somewhere with bikepacking.com.
It's an 8.
Oh gosh, that's spicy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what hit me, but like, I was like, guys, I want to do this for my birthday weekend. And I really want to see if we can do this, because maybe it was also a thing in my mind that from starting off, not even knowing where to put my handlebar back because it was scrapping on my front tire, and kind of fixing it with a cable tie. And yeah, and just basically not knowing anything about bikepacking. I really wanted to prove to myself that after being on the saddle for so long, I can even tackle like a route like this. And it was the best decision ever because it was a fantastic route. It was such a great time with Giacomo and Luise, and yeah, a great experience.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love hearing that side of a story. You started this trip as a total novice, and then you get to Ecuador and you're deciding that you're going to take a 8 out of 10 difficulty route on bikepacking.com out and do a route through Cotopaxi. So hiker bikes was a thing here, tough terrain. Did you have bad weather follow you there as well? Like, I'm imagining you're up at some very high elevation as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty high elevation. We had a lot of winds, but somehow we just really had a good time on this route. I mean, it was like all day pushing and even hiking the bikes, but we were all just in such a good mood on this tour that even though we were pushing our bikes for maybe, I don't know, half of the time, maybe even not half of the time, but like a lot of hours that we were just pushing our bikes and sometimes didn't really know where the trail went, but just the landscape again, it was so incredible. We were surrounded by volcanoes.
Wow.
It was absolutely beautiful, and again, so breathtaking to know that I can, like, I'm such an autonomous person, being able to be in inhabitable land where you could never survive if you were, I don't know, like left here, but then you're here with your bicycle and somehow manage to set up a tent and cook your food and experience it this way. So amazing.
Oh, it would be energizing as well. And I think, the struggle and the physical challenges, I think it would make all those nature moments of awe even more incredible and feel more rewarding. It's that old adage, sometimes the reason we love going to the top of the hill is the views are better when we feel like we've earned them.
100%.
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
As a ski tourer, maybe you feel like that because, you would ski traverse up to top of climbs before, you're earning your turns, we would call that in Australia, not necessarily taking the chairlift to the top. So it's a very similar type of feel.
Yeah.
What an incredible way to celebrate your birthday.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, you've set the bar high for next year, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be hard to beat, definitely, especially as like Louisa carried up like a bottle of champagne and a cake in her panniers.
Oh my gosh, Louisa, you're awesome.
She's amazing, really, yeah. No, we've had a great time. And to what you said before, I totally agree because, in the beginning when I doubted sticking to this bikepacking thing in Patagonia because it was really hard and all I was longing for was having a good time on the beach and just having like instant fun. I just wanted to I was like, I'm taking this time off and I'm not having a good time all the time. Why am I even doing this? But in the end, once you realized this feeling, if you earn your fun, if that makes sense, if you really work for something and you've had such a low, then the high is just going to be so high and so rewarding. And I was kind of, for this trip, I was kind of expecting it to really calm me down because I was just being out in nature all the time. And after like a stressful time at home in Germany and Innsbruck, I thought, okay, I'm getting away from all this and having like this very peaceful time in South America. But that's not what bikepacking is. Bikepacking is like having extreme emotions. And I think it took me a time to really get into this appreciation of this too, because in the beginning I was like, well, if I'm feeling like this devastated and this exhausted for so many times, why am I even doing this? But once you realize you've ever overcome this enormous challenges and you get this feeling of, wow, I just did this route. I just made it up this hill. I pushed my bike up here. so amazing, and it was hard, but now I feel so like accomplished, and this feels so proud of myself, and it's just such an amazing feeling.
I think actually it was a very recent guest, Alistair Humphreys. He called it out. He said the highs are higher, the lows are lower, and you feel the emotional extremes more and more on these journeys.
Yeah.
Mentioning Giacomo there, I did let him know that I was going to interview you and said, hey, if you've got a question for me, let me know what it is. So Giacomo, being Giacomo, gave it a lot of thought and then came back to me. And he wants to know, Melanie, having been through your South America adventure and now returned back to Innsbruck, what are the sort of life lessons that your journey in South America taught you that you've managed to sort of integrate into your life now? What are things that you have learnt from your travels that you realise you need more of in your life in Innsbruck?
I think the big thing is that like what we talked about earlier too, that it's so important to have small goals and not the huge big picture, because that's just sometimes so far in the distance, and it can get so overwhelming if you think about, oh, I want to, I don't know, have this job at some point, or I want to be there in a few years. And sometimes to get started, or this might even not make you get started on things, but if you have like little steps in between, this is a lot more feasible. So I think that's one big thing that I can kind of take in my life right now as well. Not always focusing on the big picture, but on the little steps that lead there. And yeah, and then yeah, just in general, just trying, like there's like probably one thing is that I met so many amazing people on the road, and everybody has their own way of living, and it's just so important to always see your own path, even though like in the past I used to compare myself a lot to like how others are and like what they're doing with, I don't know, anything, their life, their sport, whatever. But the big thing is that you focus on what is actually fun to me and what is my way of living. And like it's like, what's my way of bikepacking, like what's my pace. And it's totally okay to have your pace because it's your pace, and that's the same for life. I think if you don't want to be in a 40-hour work week, if you want to have other projects, if you want to live this or this way, it's totally fine. It's, you just have to find your happiness with it.
I love it. The great life lessons to have taught yourself. So many memories and experiences along the way as well. Like my mind's blown thinking just about how your journey did unfold there. One thing that I love though, Melanie, and I feel it, that you were energized by this journey as it went on. And it wasn't that it wasn't hard work and that you didn't struggle and that you had your low moments, but I think once you got that awareness, like you said, when you went solo in Argentina and proved to yourself your own capability and changed that perspective mindset to the small goals, I guess it was energizing more and more with each day. Oh, I love it. I have to be sneaky here and go off beat a little bit because I can't do a podcast without mentioning food. We touched on it really briefly when you were talking about rations, but I just want to ask you a quick question. What's the best food that you discovered in South America?
Well, there's not going to be a lot because South America is not famous for its good food.
I've heard this. But what did you find then was one of the staples that you were particularly seeking out, if there were choices, which I'm gathering there weren't many on your route?
So definitely, well, I mean, in Argentina and Chile, I think the thing that is most famous everywhere in South America are the empanadas.
Oh, yum.
And especially in Argentina, they have amazing bakeries that make empanadas. And especially the ones from the oven. In Chile, they tend to fry them all the time, but in Argentina, they actually like bake them in the oven with a lot of veggies inside. Like I'm a vegetarian, so like it was always a bit hard to find.
My God, how did you go in Argentina as a vegetarian? Because if I've heard if any country is a meat country, it's Argentina, right?
Honestly, I think Argentina wasn't the problem. I think Bolivia was the problem, especially like.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Bolivia is really big on meat. Like they eat a lot of chicken. Like I think they eat only chicken. Like there's so much chicken with fries. It's like on every corner. And then on the Altiplano, because like the people that live on the Altiplano, I love to chat with all the locals, and they only get, like, if you live on the Altiplano, that you don't get a lot of food supplies, because it's like a jeep comes through maybe once a week, maybe once a month, they never know. And then you're basically like left with what you have, and all they have is like herds of alpaca. So they just like eat the alpacas, right?
Subsistence farming, really.
Yeah, I actually also like, I don't like, I'm vegetarian, but sometimes you just have to go with what's going on, right? And at some point I was while Luise was on the Uturuncu volcano, actually, I was invited by a family to eat with them, and they had a huge alpaca soup. And as I was devastated for any nutritional thing, I actually ate the soup with them. It was an interesting experience.
It's a real eye-opener too, and a window into the way that other people are living, isn't it? I always remember a good friend of mine talking about it. Like, we here can go to a supermarket and buy anything. Anything.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you want for dinner? Well, what would you like to make? You can make anything. You can get all the ingredients. We even have specialty places where we can get specialty ingredients, but we can generally find them everywhere.
Yeah.
But the idea that, a Jeep might be coming this week or in a month, and you have what you can farm, it's not a concept that many of us can have experience with either.
Yeah. And especially after experiencing this for quite some stretches, because, with the bike, you tend to like go on the path that's just not as common, I would say. And so we've had, like in Patagonia too, we were at the end of the season, so a lot of shops were already closed. So we basically, for half a year, we always had to deal with what we could find. And yeah, and then it was just a lot of bread and whatever just we could find, pasta. Coming back to Europe after this and just standing I remember the first time standing in the supermarket again, and I just felt like, I can't believe this. This is every product in like all shapes and forms and versions of it, and you just stand there and you're like, what is, like, blown away by overconsumption that we have in those stores. So it was almost like, I think I even left the store without buying anything, because I was just so overwhelmed. And it was like something I like kind of like I was wishing for that when I was in Bolivia. I was like, oh, I wish I could be in one of our supermarkets and go shopping, and I want to have all these choices. But once I got back to Germany and I had all these choices, I was like, why do we have so many things? Other places have nothing, and we have such a huge, vast...
Yeah, it's sort of like a reverse culture shock when you come back home.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
How have you found coming back home? How have you found, like, the end of the trip and then being back into the routine life? How has that been?
It is quite challenging, I would say, because you're on the road. And I mean, I've been on longer trips before, but like studying somewhere, so it wasn't as much of a reverse culture shock, like you said before, because I was always in some sort of like a dense society way, in like a normal life. But now coming back after like seeing so many different ways of life, to even having experienced this freedom, and this completely different way of living for this time. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe you can imagine, like, if you have like a gear shifter almost, and you would, like, during the trip it just went like on the slowest gear, and like life just moves really, like a lot of things are going on, but like in general, just all the stimuli that you have is just very low. Like you have nature around you, you talk to people sometimes, but that's pretty much all that's going on. You're thinking about like, oh, I need a place to sleep and I need some water and things like that. And so life is just very slow in your head, I would say, and you have a lot of space in your head. That's what I appreciate a lot. And now coming back, it's like as if like somebody took this gear shifter into like the highest gear, and it's like, okay, now you're back, and there's 100 things that you have to organize. They're working again, and there's so much going on. And of course, I still have a lot of friends here, and try to see all of them, and organizing where I'm living, and there's so much to organize and to think about all the time. And like I feel like my head is just like constantly running so fast, and it's pretty overwhelming.
One of the joys of taking these type of journeys is that daily life is simple, and it's simple because your choices and what you have to do each day are simple. You have to ride somewhere, find something to eat, and get some water, find somewhere to sleep. find somewhere to go to the toilet. But things are simple. You don't have all this overwhelming schedules, routine, commitments. It's just condensed to your basic needs, isn't it?
Yeah, and all the problems you're facing on a trip like this, I feel like they're easily solvable, I would say.
Haha, love that.
Yeah, because if you have like a flat tire, you can change a flat tire. If you have no water, you have to find a place where there's water, or you have to ask people if they know where to find water. If you have a broken tent pole, maybe you have to fix it. I don't know. Those are like easily solvable things. But like here in our reality in this modern society world, Western world, it's like, oh, I have to figure out my insurance problem as I'm living in another country, but I also have to insure this and here, and then you can't figure it out by yourself. You have to go in like a hotline and talk to someone from the insurance company over the phone, and they also don't know, and then you have to figure out, I don't know, this contract that you got in a letter and you don't know how to deal with it. Like, there are so many things. It's so complex, all these problems or the taxes, like how do I do the taxes now that I had been working in 2 different countries? And it's just so complex and so difficult that I'm already longing for another simple trip where I only have to figure out where to get the next meal and not having to figure out complex tax situations.
Thinking about simple trips and looking forward to other adventures, something that's really cool that you have decided to do as a result of taking this journey is you want to introduce other people to these type of journeys as well, and you've organised your own sort of bikepacking community event. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, so in the past years, I've been working for an event company, and we've been doing a lot of different events. And just this fall, when I came back, I was like, because I was working for this same event company again this season, and I thought, hey, I think I've actually gotten pretty good at like working at events, and I have this huge passion to like tell stories and get other people to go out there. And I thought, hey, this must be the coolest thing if I just organize my own community event. And I love planning scavenger hunts, like treasure hunts. And then I thought, hey, I might even connect like doing like a really fun thing, like doing a bikepacking scavenger hunt and introducing new people to this concept of bikepacking, offering a space for people that have never done bikepacking before but are interested in doing this, and then also having people on this event that had been on trips before. So you can really have this space for people to connect and get like inspired by other people's, like inspire and be inspired kind of.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I love this so much. So how can people find out more? What's it called? I'll put a link in the podcast description notes, but how can people find out more about you and about this event?
Yeah, for sure. So I put some information on it on my website and on my Instagram. It's called the Bikepacking Playdate.
Oh, I love it.
Because I didn't want it to be an event where it's like performance oriented, because I feel like a lot of bikepacking events or cycling events are all about a race or like a specific thing that you have to do, and then you can win something or you don't win something. And the big thing that I realized on this trip, right, that I don't like this performance pressure of cycling, and I feel there's so much more to explore. And then like having an event like focusing on the community and the fun aspect of this outdoor sport could be a really cool thing. So yeah, it's on my Instagram, and you can find the link to my website and sign up on my website if you want to. It's going to be in Innsbruck in the area.
Awesome. And your Instagram account is Living in Tents. Could be Living in Tents. I love it. It's like a pun.
You got it.
I got it.
Yeah.
Can I admit, I only got it halfway through online stalking you in research for this episode. And I was like, oh my gosh, and the penny dropped. Yeah. I loved it. Listeners, I'll provide a link in the show notes so you can find out all about it. I'm super excited for it. I think this is brilliant. I want to see more of these type of events come to life. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous about it too, because it's my first real event that I'm hosting. So
it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes, but I'm pretty pumped. I think we have about 12 people signed up already, and I think I have space for about 30. So
let's fill it up, people. Yeah. Let's get on board. This is our community. I love it.
Yeah, in case you want to join, Bella, of course, you're more than welcome.
Oh, I need to say, if the dates match, I'm there with bells on, 100%. Totally.
Cool.
Melanie, I'd like you to take me and the listeners to one day of your trip. You had many days to choose from in South America. Take us to one of those days and tell us all about it.
Yeah, that's a hard one to choose. But I think I'm going to take you to the Ecuadorian Amazon because I think it's a place where not that many people go. And on our trip, we also did this excursion a bit more spontaneously. We didn't plan on going to the Ecuadorian Amazon in the first place, but that morning we woke up on the river. There's a huge river, and we camped right next to the river, packed up our things, and started cycling towards something that I didn't know if it actually existed, because we knew we wanted to cross through the, like, not on the main road, but on like a side road. And there would be a lot of river crossings along the way, but we didn't know how big those rivers would be. But it seemed like there was some sort of a bridge or a gondola thing going over the rivers. So we were pretty excited to see what's happening there. Yeah, waking up in the Amazon, it wasn't deep in the Amazon, but it's still like a lot of birds chirping around you, and it's very warm. And we started cycling, and maybe to get the story a bit more real, also like a reality of like traveling as a woman on a bike. Like I was on my period, and I had really bad period pain that day, and I didn't have any medication anymore because we were just out in the nowhere, and so I was dealing with really, really bad cramps. And I don't know if you've been on a bike when you had your period, but
it's horrible.
It's horrible, and like I sometimes have really bad pain. So at that lunchtime, I was just laying at a lunch spot that we had, and I didn't know if, like, how to continue cycling because I had no more energy. So we actually decided to hitchhike a little bit, and that was a good decision because we met these hilarious people that took us on their truck for maybe 20 kilometers and had a good chat with them. And they told us a lot about the environment they were living in, and yeah, they dropped us off somewhere. And then we headed towards what we thought of was this river crossing. And once we got there, people told us they don't know if it's actually working to cross the river. Sometimes it's just too high. And we got there, we didn't find anything. And then suddenly we heard this big rattle coming from the river, and we turn around and there's this big rusty gondola thing just crossing over the river. And we were like, wow, okay, this is what we're gonna get on. Like, how does this even work? And we watch as this like big rusty, I don't even know how you call this. Is there like a word for, in Spanish they call it tarabita? It's like a...
Oh, like a teleferique almost? Like a... Yeah, like a cable car type of thing?
Yeah, like an open cable car. It's just like a bunch of like bars welded together.
Yeah, okay. I'm picturing like, and is there sort of like a wire? Do you get in one and somehow pulley yourself along to the other side of the river or something?
Basically, yeah. And they kind of invented, it's definitely like a handmade thing. And they came over and they actually, like, it's super tiny. It maybe fits a few people, but they managed to get a motorbike on this thing too. And they unloaded the motorbike, and we just looked at the thing. We're like, okay, how is this working? There's no staff that would get us on this thing and introduce us and say like, okay, yeah, here is the belt to buckle you up. No, it's like the people stared at us because they never saw tourists wanting to get on this thing. So they stared at us like, what are you guys doing with these loaded bikes that we had? So we looked at them, and they were like, oh, are you going to get on? And we're like, yeah, we want to get to the other side. And they like, well, then you better go quickly, because this thing, like, they built in this self-made mechanism that there is a pulley on the other side that just draws back this basket to the other side. So we rapidly hopped on this thing, held on for dear life, because in the beginning nothing happened, but then all of a sudden, in like major speed, this pulley pulled this cable thing over the river in a massive speed. And we know that, like, you know, if you don't hold on, you're just going to fall out and nobody notice.
Whoa.
And yeah, so if you have like problems with height or anything, it's not for you.
Oh my God, I'm so not going here, but I can't wait to see your photos of it.
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing. And like one of those experiences that like we didn't know if this cart actually existed, but then all of a sudden you're like flying over a river in this sketchy thing. Yeah, and we got to the other side, and it was getting pretty late, and all the people left from that station, and the station was like literally located on a bit of a hill on top of this river. You could see over the whole Amazon that stretched out in front of you. Fog was coming out of the Amazon, and the sun was starting to go down in like a red ball. It was absolutely amazing, and we decided that we wanted to pitch our tent on top of this lookout that we were standing on, and we sat there and had one of the most amazing sunsets that we saw on this trip. And it was, and then like a huge moon just rose on the other side and shed the light on the whole Amazon. It was absolutely amazing.
Oh my goodness, Melanie, you know at the start where you're like, oh, it's hard to choose a day. What a day you chose. That is incredible. Wow. What a journey you've had. What a journey I've had listening to you tell me about your journey. This is just peak wanderlust, listeners. I don't know about you. Who else wants to go to South America? Me? Wow. It saddens me to say it's time to wind things up, but all good things sometimes do have to come to an end. I've got 3 quick questions to ask you, and I ask them of everyone. The first one is music related. You're a guest now of Seek Travel Ride. It means you get to choose a song. It's going to be the soundtrack to your adventure, and it gets added to the Seek Travel Ride guest music playlist, available on Spotify and Apple Music, listeners. Over 5.5 hours, I think now, of epic tunes. What song are you going to choose, Melanie, to be the soundtrack to your adventure?
So I'm going to choose the song that's called Nos siguen pegando abajo, which is a Spanish song, of course, because I mean the story takes place in South America, and it's actually a song from the 80s, from the Argentinian 80s, and it's such a fantastic song. I got introduced to it by an Uruguayan bikepacker, and it's definitely the song I listen to most on the trip. It's such a good mood song. It's amazing.
The thing I love about the playlist, it's so eclectic and it is international, so this is brilliant. I love it. You were down. Okay. Next question. You have a choice to make one day. You go in one direction and you'll be faced with a never-ending road that is so bumpy, it's like a washboard surface, super corrugated, no smoothness anywhere. Or if you go the other way and you are faced with an endless, brutal headwind, which one are you going to choose?
This both sounds like summing up my Patagonian experience.
I think you had both at the same time.
And which was both terrible. But as soon as the wind stopped, or we luckily had a curve and headed towards the other way for at least 500 meters, and we were still on this bumpy road, but without the wind, it was definitely better. So I would choose the road.
The bumpy road. You know, I knew when I was interviewing you at the start and you were talking about the wind in Patagonia, I was thinking, oh, you're going to choose the corrugations. How could you not?
Yeah. Even though those corrugations would like get to you at some point too. Like I remember like having meltdowns in Patagonia, even without the wind, if it was just this absolutely washboard road and you just can't even find a thought in your head.
I think it's hard. I think I don't qualify it with a wind speed, but I think if I had like a wind speed, like the headwind was like, 40 k's an hour, but not gusting at like 90, I think I would choose the headwind. Because as horrible as that is, if anyone has been on, a washboard road for, even 20 or 30 minutes, it's horrendous. And I can't imagine spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on it.
Yeah, it really gets to you.
Final question. I'm loving the answers that I'm getting to this one. You get to finish this sentence for me, Melanie, and that is... the best thing about taking a bike adventure is...
Oof. I have to think about this for a second. Best thing about taking a bike adventure. This is quite a philosophical question almost.
Oh, it could be, yeah.
Yeah.
But it brings unique answers and I'm loving it.
Yeah. I think like the thing that comes to my mind right now, honestly, the best thing about this bike adventure is just having time to be bored from time to time, because that's something that I just never do in my everyday life anymore, and I don't have time and all of a sudden you have time and for your thoughts. So I think the best thing about the bike adventure is to have time for yourself and your thoughts, and give yourself the time to be bored and let your thoughts wander.
I love it. I love it. And it's through that time that you have those thoughts that you've learnt so much about yourself too.
Totally.
Yeah, you've come back a different person when you set off. And if we were going to be philosophical, all those life lessons you've learnt, but it gives you that extra sense of self-certainty and assuredness of who you are and what you're capable of. Oh my gosh, Melanie Schautt, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I always finish speaking with guests like yourself thinking, oh, if only I had another hour, if only I had another 2 hours. Or who knows, maybe there's another podcast session in our future. I'm so, so glad that as a beginner you decided to say yes to this journey.
Me too.
You know, in computer games, how, you know, when we were growing up, we played computer games and you'd get better and better and then you'd up the levels. Like, you must have got to level 10 by the end of week 2. Then you took on the monster and then you got up through there as well. But all to say, what a journey you've been on, what life lessons you've taught yourself. It's so clear that bikepacking is now a part of you, and it's an extra thing that you do when you are outside in the outdoors. It's clear to me that being in the outdoors is an energizing space for you. You've chosen to live in a place that gives you energy. I'm excited to see where your next bike adventures go. I'm so stoked about what you're doing to help bring more of the bikepacking community together with your upcoming event. All is to say, Melanie Schautt, thank you so, so much for sharing your stories and experiences here on the show for Seek Travel Ride.
Thank you so much for giving me the space to share some of my thoughts. And it's been amazing talking to you too, Bella. And maybe at some point, I mean, Europe is such a small place considering other continents. Maybe we'll ride along each other at some point.
100%. You're always welcome to come to the Pyrenees. And I mean, I do need to go to Innsbruck in real life.
For sure. It's such an amazing place to live and to see, to visit.
Awesome. Listeners, what did you think of Melanie's story there? I took so many things away from it, and I absolutely love that she said yes to this adventure in the first place. The idea that, again, she didn't even have a bike when she was contemplating going on this journey. And if you remember the very start of the episode, the little test ride she did in Germany where things did go bad and she even got sick and injured with her knee, but yet that wasn't enough to put her off. The idea that during this journey as well, it was when she first realised to be okay with the idea of identifying herself as being a bikepacker. And then the other thing that I learned was also this idea that we actually learn from each other. And it's sort of through conversations, through interactions, through time spent with other bike travellers that we learn about tips, tricks, techniques, and everything in between. The little things that Melanie shared there about her sleep system, about how she can keep warm, I am certain that some of you listeners are listening to thinking, oh, I'm going to try that. And that is what I've loved about the show, sharing these stories and experiences so you listening there can get fuel to put towards your own adventures, take away a lot of inspiration from my guest stories, put thought into action and take those journeys as well. If it's anything listening to Melanie has taught me is it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to be a beginner. You can learn along the way. And whilst there might be problems that come up for you, generally they're always solvable. Thank you so much, Melanie, for sharing your story. What an absolute pleasure it was. Now, listeners, are you enjoying Seek Travel Ride? You want to see the show thrive? One of the best ways you can do so is by actually sharing it with your friends who may also be interested in bike adventures. Sharing an episode of the show, talking about the podcast to them, it exposes it to more and more people and helps the show to grow with an even broader community. It's also organic growth, which I really welcome. So if you think that you have friends in your friendship group who would enjoy listening to these awesome bike traveling stories, please do this podcaster a real big favour. Share them an episode. It can be your favourite one. It could be this one. Whichever. Please do so. I will be forever appreciative of that. And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening. Hey there, adventurers! Are you loving the stories on Seek Travel Ride? If so, you can help the podcast wheels turning, literally. Head to the link in the show notes and buy me a coffee. Every coffee fuels this podcast, supports incredible guest stories, and keeps the adventure alive. So go ahead, click the link in the show notes, grab me a virtual brew, and let's ride on together.